Hello everyone, Ian Wishart here again for another episode of the Take a Pew podcast. And as always, I'm joined by regular pewmate Simon Clark.
Hello everybody. Hello mate. And what was that bit of music?
Oh, I got Status Quo to do a version of our theme tune. Good, isn't it?
Well, I suppose if you like that kind of thing. Anyway, what have we got coming up on the show today, mate?
Well, surprise, surprise, we have a guest who's a Christian minister, and we're going to have a natter about what makes them who they are, including their school days, their childhood memories, their favourite things and their perfect picnic.
Oh, and I hope I still get to ask my random questions.
Sadly, yes. And our guest this time is the Church of England rector in London and the chap in charge of planning Spring Harvest, a massive Christian gathering I'm sure many of our listeners will be familiar with.
Sounds like a busy man.
Well, we'll find out all about it right now, because this is Take a Pew with the Reverend Cris Rogers.
Cris Rogers! Can we have the proper theme now, mate?
OK, here you go.
Take a pew.
And here we are in the London borough of Tower Hamlets, and specifically in the famous area of Bow.
Yeah, got any old jam jar and drove up the Frog and Toad.
Still living in the 50s then, Simon. Anyway, we've made it to All Hallows Church, and here to meet Rector the Reverend Cris Rogers. Cris, welcome to the show, and please, take a pew.
Why, thank you.
Hello, Chris. Lovely to meet you. Perhaps you could introduce yourself to our wonderful listeners.
Yeah, hello. My name is the Reverend Cris Rogers. I'm 42 years old. No, actually, that's not true. It's 43. Yeah. It was my birthday last week.
Birthday?
Yeah, that caught me off guard. Since I had COVID, I slept through it. I'm married to Becky. She's a vicar as well. I've got 2 children, Daisy and Isaac, and I was ordained, I think, in 2007. But don't quote me on that because I'm not done. I don't remember. And my current job title is I'm the Rector of All Hallows Bow, which sounds good, doesn't it?
This sounds magnificent.
Rector.
Fantastic.
Well, as ever, we're looking forward to getting a unique Take a Pew insight into your world. And why don't we start at the very beginning? Where did you enter this life? I understand it was somewhere east of the Yucatan Peninsula.
The Yucatan... where is the Yucatan Peninsula?
I think it's west of Yorkshire.
Yeah, I had to look that up.
I was born in Pontefract, West Yorkshire.
Nice.
Grew up in Normanton, next to Castleford.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm from Wakey.
right.
And,
Rugby league territory, all those.
I've really had to work hard to play down my Yorkshire accent over the years. But I'm from Normanton.
So is that Pontefract as in Pontefract cakes? So you like a bit of licorice, do you?
Well, yes, and
Yeah.
Haribo. So
And
Haribo in
Haribos,
the UK is
yeah.
made in Pontefract. So when I went to do my A-levels, my dad used to give me my £3, dinner money, and I would take it and I would spend £1 on a mixed tub of Haribo Misfits. Ooh. That was my lunch. I'd then take the £2 and pocket it, and by Friday I got a tenner. And that was just enough to go and buy an album. So I'd get to the record shop and buy myself an album, having eaten nothing but Haribo all week. So all my first, Pulp, Blur, Oasis, Nirvana, Beatles, Stones, The Who, all of that was bought with me pocket money that was given for me lunch. So I was stick thin.
That's good. So the young Chris up there in West Yorkshire. So obviously you had to go to have some education at some point. And so we have a question for you. And that question is...
What were you like at school? Were you a little bit geeky? Or were you a little bit freaky? Or were you a little bit cheeky? What were you like at school?
Yes, Chris, what were you like at school?
That's really hard to ask yourself. How my opinion on
Yes.
how I was at school, or my teacher's opinion. I aimed to keep my head down. So I'm dyslexic, hated school, didn't do academia, but I loved art. I loved drama, I loved music, I loved all the creative stuff. So I would come alive when I went into the art studio, and I even did my GCSE art a year early because I really loved doing that stuff. Design technology as well, that was the other thing I did really well at. But when it came to maths and science and those, I just kept my head down. I just didn't want to really be there. And I had a really good group of mates. There was about 7 of us that all went to the local church. So I had a couple that were older than me and a couple that were younger than me. So we would walk to school and back together. And so I'd walk with my cousin who went to church youth group with us. So there was a little gang of us. And so I grew up not having a set of friends, I think, that were in my classroom, but were friends in the school. So the guys above me and the guys younger than me. So there was a good little gang of us. Yeah. But I kept my head down. Yeah. But I did the school plays.
Okay.
Yeah. I was in Oliver. And I was in Wizard of Oz and all that kind. I played the.
What you playing, Wizard of Oz?
I played the wizard.
Ah.
Well, what that meant was I was behind this giant mask of the wizard's head, and I did the mouth and the voice for it.
Brilliant.
They never gave me up front. I always played like the B characters and the C characters.
It's a funny thing, is it, with the Wizard of Oz? The wizard sounds like that's the lead role, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not much of a role at all, is it?
I wanted to play.
Dorothy.
The Scarecrow.
No.
I really wanted to play the Scarecrow.
Yeah.
And the day that the girl that played the Scarecrow was sick, I was so excited because they let me play it. I thought, this is my chance. I'm going to show them that I could do this. No, they didn't give it to me.
No. And what about alongside school? What else did you get up to as a youngster?
Cow tipping was my favourite pastime.
Cow tipping.
Cow tipping.
If they gave you particularly good service.
It sounds dreadful. I think if you grow up in a mining village that's no longer a mining village because the pits had shut, how do you entertain yourself? So it became about what did you and your mates get up to. So it really was going out, finding ways of terrorising the neighbourhood without getting in too much trouble.
Did you get in any serious trouble at all?
I did get into some trouble, and I think my poor parents have found out about it years later because one of my best mates' dads was the local sergeant. So there was 2 times I actually got arrested, and both times he was on the radio. And on one of the occasions he said, "Oh, just give him a clip round the ear and send him home." So they did, and then the second time it was about 2:00 in the morning, and we were caught. And it was one of those situations where they were out trying to hunt somebody down that had stolen a car. They were in the helicopter, we're on our BMXs, going around the estate following the helicopter, and eventually they start chucking us rather than the person who was trying to chuck. So I did get myself into numbers of pieces of bother, but because my best mate's dad was the sergeant, my parents never found out. So if you'd have said to my mum before my wedding, was Chris ever in trouble? She'd say, no, he's a good lad, never in trouble. But then it started to come out because my best mate, whose dad was the sergeant, was my best man. Yeah. And I ended up warning him, you can't tell that story, you can't tell that story because my parents don't know. But
Can we edit this out, by the way?
No, I've now used them in sermons, and I don't. Okay. My problem now is I don't know what my mum and dad do know and don't know, because I don't know what sermons they've listened to and what they haven't. So I don't actually know what they know.
Maybe it's time for a full and frank admission of everything.
So I think outside of school was far more interesting. There was one funny story where we were in the park. The birds were being stolen from the bird cages in the park. And we were there watching the guy stealing the birds at 2:00 in the morning. And you have a problem then. You've seen a crime, but you're out at 2:00 in the morning. What do you do? Because you know that you shouldn't be where you are right now. So we ended up having to go and tell my mate's dad about what we'd seen, because luckily my parents still never found out.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you couldn't tweet about that in those days, could you?
No, you couldn't do it.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Simon's back.
Sorry, chaps.
But it sounds like there's some great fun experiences in there, actually. And we have another question for you as you think back across all that time. And this question is...
What's your fondest childhood memory? What's your fondest of all your childhood memories? What's your fondest?
Oh. Yes, what's your fondest childhood memory?
That's a good question. I think we were, just before we were filming, we were having a conversation about going to the cinema to see a significant movie for us with a family member that's it's really ingrained in your mind. And I remember going to the ABC cinema in Wakefield to see Ghostbusters 2 with my dad. We arrived to find the queue was too long for the showing we wanted. So we missed that showing and we stood outside in a line down the road for the next showing. I mean, don't do that anymore. You don't queue for a movie anymore. And we queued down the street for Ghostbusters 2, and I remember there's a court scene in Ghostbusters 2 when they're all under arrest and these 2 ghosts appear and they bust these two ghosts in the movie. And that scene, that moment in time, is ingrained in my mind as this beautiful moment of going to the cinema with my dad. Sorcerer's Stone, I remember queuing for that as well. We just crept in. We all had to sit separate from each other because it was so busy during a half term. You don't do that anymore.
It's a very good thing because we haven't had a cinematic related memory before, have we?
Yeah.
But it's a very rich point. I'm sure everyone would have that.
Definitely one of mine. My 10th birthday, going to see Star Wars and just walking down the centre of the island, getting the seats right at the front with all my mates. And my 10th birthday, just awesome. Never forget it.
So, in between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2, we've got a cinema up the road here called Genesis, which is an old Fleabag, dusty cinema. Love it. Tickets are £5 a ticket, and it's like going to a cinema as you were a kid. We went to see a string of movies. We saw Empire Strikes Back. We saw Back to the Future 2 and 3. Goonies, and I loved it. Don't know if my kids enjoyed it as much as I did, but seeing Star Wars in the cinema, because I'd never done that. Apart from those original movies, I've got multiple copies of them, different versions from different times and different VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, but never seen it in the cinema.
Yeah, I remember sneaking in somehow. I remember my dad just about got us in to see Jaws, and I can picture exactly where I was sitting in the cinema, and then going to see Rollerball.
Yeah.
That was my first double A, as they were in those days. They were 15s now, I suppose. And I had no idea. I thought this big mystical idea of what a double A film would be like. And a rollerball starts with blank screen, a blackout, and then the spotlight comes into the middle of the rollerball thing, and it's playing Bach's Toccata and Fugue. I was terrified. I thought, I can't handle this. I'm going. Anyway, there we go. I suspect we might come back to films a little bit later on. So that was childhood then. So you then emerged blinking in kind of adult life after school's finished. Where did life take you then?
So I became a Christian at about 15 and a half.
Okay.
So my story then makes sense only because I became a Christian. And I would say my life did turn itself upside down because of that. My experience of reading the gospel was that I found a Jesus that was so compelling, so unreligious, and so compelling that I wanted to follow Jesus, but I wasn't interested in being a Christian. And it was about 6 months after I was like, right, I'm in. If I'm doing this, then yes to Jesus. It was about 6 months in. I remember God in a prayer time just said, would you ever say to your best friend, his girlfriend is ugly? And I remember in this prayer, no, I wouldn't. I'm like, what a bizarre thing for the Lord to say to me. And the next thing he said to me was, well, why do you do that with my church? And it was this moment where I suddenly realised I couldn't love Jesus and not love his church. So at that age, there was this thing in the back of my head going, right, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? So I finished my GCSEs. I go and do my A-levels, art, design, chemistry, and general studies, which is pub quiz, isn't it? So that was my A-levels. And off the back of that, I went to Leeds Art and Design College. I did really well with that, and making stuff, painting stuff, creating stuff is what it's how I'm hardwired. So from that, I got a place to go to Goldsmiths in London and do film and photography. Now, at the time, you couldn't have gone anywhere better. Goldsmiths was like going to the Cambridge, the Oxford of the art world. So I that's where I was heading, and about 6 months before Jude had come to Goldsmiths, I just got this profound sense that I had to go to theological college. And I told my lecturers, I think I can't go to Goldsmiths. I think I need to go to theological college. I don't know why, but I really think this is what I've got to do. And at that point, they were so upset with me because every year they would get one student to Goldsmiths, and that year they got two, and I'm rejecting it. And at that point, they just cut me off. It was like I suddenly was left to my own devices. Actually, my grades went up because they left me to my own devices. So I finished art and ended up going to Trinity College in Bristol to do a degree in theology. And so I'm dyslexic. And when I say I'm dyslexic, I really mean, I don't mean that I struggle a little bit. I really don't do English. So going from an art background to suddenly studying theology words was a little bit of a culture shock. And I'm surrounded by people twice my age studying theology. So that was an odd couple of years. But the irony is now I'm about to publish my 10th or 11th book.
I was going to say,
so
it's bad at writing. Yeah.
Well, it's partly because I am dyslexic that I'm better at writing. Because I'm dyslexic, I tend to take big ideas and make it very simple for people. I then have a very good wife at editing. who edits for me, which means it's more readable than what some other people put out there. So I ended up in Bristol and did my degree in theology.
Well, there's two things of note. We had a couple of people that we've had on the show before have been to Trinity, I think. But the other thing to mention is the remarkable incidence of dyslexia in our guests.
Yeah.
Isn't there?
Yeah.
Because at least half
I reckon, yeah.
have
definitely.
been dyslexic.
Yeah.
There's something strange about that.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? But often when you come across a really good speaker, and you push them, you find out behind there is somebody who is actually dyslexic. So the reason they're a good speaker is they have to put it into memory rather than from paper.
Yeah.
So what you get is something that's more living because it's coming out of them rather than off a page.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But as fellow dyslexic Neil said to us, it's okay because dyslexics are teeple poo. Anyway, so Trinity had a fun time at Trinity.
I had a very fun time at Trinity, whilst at the same time hated it.
Right, okay, good.
Now, I have to be very careful. Trinity was really good to me. Really good to me. I just really struggled in that environment.
Yeah.
I ended up getting myself a Saturday job at Jessop's photography shop on White Ladies Road just to get out to meet non-Christians. So I ended up getting a job as a way of really getting out back into the world each week, just to reconnect with reality. And I think sometimes, and what I often found at theological college, you get clever clogs who thought that they would know best and they would be very good at arguing and being quite quick in their thinking and their arguing. And you're thinking, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't feel right to me, but I'm not fast enough to give a rebuttal. So I would find that environment just not the most appealing. I'd then go to Jessop's and spend time with members of staff who were addicted to LSD, were clubbing every night, people who were in the art world, and I used to find them far more interesting. And faith was always 5 minutes into the conversation because it would just come up. So I used to love it. And my dissertation whilst at college was on could you do church in a nightclub, because this guy that I spent time with every Saturday would go clubbing most nights at raves that were illegal, and he'd take drugs all night and then come to work having not slept. So I was really interested because he would talk about having these spiritual moments while dancing at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's really interesting. So my dissertation was all about could you do nightclub church.
What was the conclusion of it?
My conclusion was yes you can. It would be absolutely amazing. But my lecturer who marked my dissertation said it was a bad idea because the Book of Common Prayer cost nothing to run, and this would cost thousands of pounds. But it sent me on a journey of what could church look like.
So you came out of there.
Well, the highlight of university,
Trinity,
was that I met my wife.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Which was never
Can't
the
skip that
intention.
bit,
But I met my wife. She was trained to be a priest, and I wasn't yet. I was putting that off. I did not want to be a Church of England priest, so I just married one instead. But she knew that one day I would get ordained, but it just wasn't. There wasn't the right time.
So what did you do then?
Moved to Birmingham. Because she was from Birmingham, so I thought, hang on, she's from Birmingham. If I at least head to the right city, she might be interested in sticking around a bit longer. I moved to Birmingham, became a youth worker of a church. The church had never had a youth worker prior in Boldmere. And I would say, you look back on parts of your life and you think that was a golden moment. I look back on my time in Boldmere, fresh out of college, no idea what I was doing, really keen to share faith with young people. I couldn't lose because the church had had no youth work, so whatever I did was new. The people were wonderful. I loved my boss. My boss loved me. I loved the staff team. I loved the curate. It was just
It just
wonderful.
all worked.
It worked,
yeah.
and we had a church car park, and we basically turned it into a skate park. We built these ramps, we turned it into a skate park, and on a Saturday we ran the church car park as a skate park. The next thing we knew, we were having 100 young people coming on a Friday night to a church service we were running in the church hall off the back of the skate park called The Gathering. So we ended up, dissertation was about could you do church in a nightclub? Well, the next best thing became could I do church in a skate park? And the answer was yes. I then went on to do my master's degree, and that was then looking at could you do church in a skate park? And loved having this church attached to the skate park. It was really good fun. We did that for 5 years.
Wow, okay. And what brand of church was that?
Church of England.
That was Church of England,
yeah.
was it? Yeah.
So I've been Church of England all the way through,
Okay.
but I wouldn't say that I feel very Church of England.
Right.
But then my friends who are not Church of England say, you're definitely Church of England. Don't worry about that.
So that takes us through to sort of mid-noughties, I guess.
Yeah, so we left Birmingham in 2005. As a part of my MA, I'd critiqued a particular church, criticised it, and then they offered me a job off the back of it. So I moved to Soul Survivor Harrow, which is in West London. We ended up moving, both of us, obviously, because we were then married. Becky then got a job working for the diocese, and I got a job working for Soul Survivor Harrow, where I was there for 5 years.
Is that Church of England, Soul Survivor?
Soul Survivor is Church of England.
Oh, I didn't
Mike
know that.
is
Yeah.
ordained to the Church of England, and we were there for 5 years. Loved that, but really for 5 years had this profound sense of frustration because the church was very white, very middle class, and was reaching young people who were all heading to university. They would join us, they were with us for a few years, and they go to university. And I just found it really frustrating. So we were itching to be somewhere else, but knew that's where God had put us to be for a season. And it's whilst I was there that the bishop, Pete Broadbent, who I knew from Spring Harvest, said, you need to get ordained. And I said, I'm not sure, Pete, I'm the kind of person you want to get ordained. I think I'd irritate you. And he ended up saying, well, I'll ordain anything that moves. I'll even ordain a dog, he said. So I'm like, calling me a dog. But so Pete Broadbent was the one that says, you really do need to get ordained. Stop messing around and get on with this. So they ordained me whilst at Soul Survivor as a curate. So when my curacy ended, this is how we end up here. I sit down with Pete Broadbent and say, look, Pete, I just feel like I need to move on. And Pete said, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, look, I'd love a church that's closed. I'd love a church that you're closing or closed. And I ended up sitting down with the Bishop of London and said, Bishop, give me a church you're going to shut in the area of town you can't get a young evangelical to go to a church that you think there's no chance of anything happening at, and we'll just see what we could do. So we ended up moving here in 2010 to a congregation of 6. The bishop said to us, Chris, it's most probably going to fail. That church has never thrived. It's not you, it's not a problem, but we'll put you in for 5 years and then we'll remove you if it's not going to work. So that's what we did in 2010. We moved here. So this house hadn't had a vicar in it. The 80s or something. It'd been rented out to different people at different times. For 5 years before we moved in, it was rented to 5 young men who ran a business from the house called Wazzle Limited. If you Googled Wazzle Limited, you realise they made softcore pornography from the house and they were growing marijuana in the garden. That says something about how far gone this place had got from what it should have been. And I'd come and sat through a church service here, congregation of 7, and some retired vicar was here doing the service. And during the service, this wasp, it was January, this wasp came and stung me on the leg during the service, and I flicked it on the floor and killed it. I thought to myself, that was a weird thing to happen in January. And I thought, if that's the worst the devil can do to put me off coming here, I don't know. Yeah, but we came to look around and there was a condom on the church doorstep and a needle, and my wife said it's horrible. And I remember thinking it was raining. There's no chance she's going to say yes to coming here. And the next thing she said was, this is where we're meant to be, isn't it? It was just what God had been irritating us to be at for the 5 years we were at Soul Survivor. He had to irritate me with the middle class suburb because it wasn't where I grew up. Normanton, the local school was a very difficult school to be at. It was quite, when you see dinner ladies fist fighting, it's because there was so much that happened when I was at school. Like that. You literally saw the dinner ladies fighting, all the kids cheering them on. You know that this is a difficult area. So that's where I grew up as a working class lad, and then being in a middle class suburb of London, never going to feel at home. 12 years here, we are so at home, feels so good. I can't even tell you in a snapshot 12 years of what revitalisation looks like here, because the church that we have now is not what we had 12 years ago. And in the last 5 years, we've planted 2 churches from us as well. And, we've got a coffee shop on the front of the church now that employs people. We have a community centre that is teaching Bengali women English. Such a story of God's work, not our clever strategy. I would say the 6 people that were here when I arrived within a year really didn't like me much.
Yes.
Because of the change. But
Familiar story.
I would say now that they are my closest allies, my best friends,
okay.
and they're all in their 60s and 70s. Last year I had to bury Vic, who very much was my dad. The local coffee shop thought he was my father because we went in there so much. We both have beards. We look very similar. And we'd sit for hours talking, drinking coffee. Poor Vic passed away last year. And it really was like losing a grandfather figure. Because from the moment we arrived, he's like, I don't like what you're doing, but I know you're right. And I've got your back, but I don't like it. And gosh, you'll have me in tears, but I saw him the week before he died. And for him, he was like, I'm dying. Oh, gosh, you're going to have me. He said, I'm dying knowing that my church that I loved for years has a future.
So you had the 6 or 7 people back then.
Yeah.
How does it feel now?
We've got recovering addicts, we've got ex-offenders, we've got guys that work in the city, all sitting side by side. I've got women who have had dubious jobs in the past, who are now mums. And sometimes it's only the priest that knows what's in the pews. And it's lovely sitting there looking out sometimes because you think, oh my gosh, if you guys only knew who you're sitting next to right now. I love our church. We've got Bengali Muslim converts. We've got guys from Nigeria and Kenya, Chinese, and it's just this multicultural. We had refugees from Iran. It really feels like something heavenly, whilst at the same time it's chaos. A third of our church are in some form of recovery from active addiction. My associate minister was a coke addict for years, covered in tattoos. He looks like he's come straight from the Bronx in New York. But he's just fallen in love with Jesus, and he gets ordained this summer.
It sounds like such a rich ministry, and praise the Lord for Vic. It sounds like
don't get me.
And the other people that have had the influence. Actually, Pete Broadbent has come up before. It was Father Alex Hill. He spoke very highly of Pete.
Pete Broadbent, bizarrely, has been quite an influence on me. He was the bishop that ordained me. When he ordained me, I noticed he didn't have a bishop's ring. Most bishops, so I said, Pete, where's your bishop's ring? He said, find me a reference in the Bible with a bishop that needs to wear a ring, and I'll wear a ring. I can't. And he got me involved with the Spring Harvest Planning Group. So I now chair the Spring Harvest Planning Group. It's all Pete. It was because of him that Bishop Richard let us have a church.
Oh. Praise the Lord for Pete as well. He's just retired, hasn't he?
He has. Yeah. Still a bishop.
After a long time.
He's just a bishop without an area.
Bishop without portfolio.
Yeah.
So you touched on Spring Harvest. So you've got all the wonderful parish stuff going on, which sounds like more than enough to keep anyone busy. But Spring Harvest, so you're now kind of leading Spring Harvest.
Yeah, so Gav stepped down, and I'd been on the planning group 10 years, and every year I'd basically handed in my notice. Let somebody else have a go. I'm happy to step down, and they would say, no, not this year, Chris.
Just give it another year.
And then, so the last few years, I'd ended up writing quite a few of the themes. I'd been involved with writing a number of the themes. So every year I was like, this is my last year, and then I'd end up helping the person write the theme. I'd support them in doing it. And so each year, okay, I'll one more year. And then Gav steps down, and the board rang me up and just said, Chris, you get the institutional knowledge needed to lead this thing, because there's so many things that people don't remember. Some of the institutional knowledge around how many books you have to recommend, and who at the button site you need to talk to about keys. You don't realise how much you hold in your head. That it has made sense to pick up Spring Harvest for this next season. And really enjoy it, and it gives me something to do outside of parish. I get to theologically
Quite
write.
a significant thing to do outside.
So I've just written a book for this year's event on Nehemiah, and it's just been really fun writing a theological book on the book of Nehemiah, looking at the mission of Jesus through the lens of Nehemiah. And had so much fun during the pandemic writing that. When everybody else was locked up complaining they had nothing to do, I had a book to finish.
It's a great book, Nehemiah, isn't it? It was keep referring back to previous guests, but I think Ian Wallace, it was his favourite book of the Bible, Nehemiah, wasn't it? Yeah. And it's all about rebuilding, isn't it? So
So what's the main theme then this year?
Restore, renew, rebuild. So we're looking at Nehemiah through the life of Jesus Christ. So it's a theme that's about the rebuilding of the church post-pandemic, but it's a theme that's about the rebuilding of our lives post-pandemic, because most of us feel burnt out. We don't know why.
No, it's great. Well, I hope that goes well this year. We've both been
many
many
countless
times,
haven't we? Yeah,
but obviously not for a while. But the Spring Harvest at Home stuff worked really well, I thought.
It's great, and we'll be doing it.
Alongside.
What I'm really excited about, we've got one of the chalets that overlooks the beach, Minehead.
Oh, nice.
We've got content we're filming at Skegness, and we've got Minehead Live, and we're going to basically do like a Good Morning Britain from site. So if those that don't come can encounter, you're not going to get everything, and you're definitely going to have FOMO, fear of missing out, because you're not going to see everything. But there'll be an online event where you get to kind of watch in on the things that are happening.
We're just closing out the Rogers portfolio. So how's the podcast going?
The podcast
you enjoy doing that?
I love it. I love it because it becomes, there's so many things that I get excited by that are never going to become a sermon, and I get to talk about it in the podcast, and I get to interview people in the podcast. In fact, my favourite guest recently is a cold case detective from the US.
Wow.
He approached Jesus Christ as if he was a cold case to look at what evidence is there out there for Christianity, beyond Christianity. What other witnesses are there? And that was really interesting. So
That sounds great. It seems to be quite a thing, this cold case thing.
I love
sort of
Netflix.
top it,
And
yeah.
Netflix is filled full of cold cases.
Yeah.
So talking of Netflix, what do you do to relax?
Well, dress up as a stormtrooper, probably.
Okay.
That's one of my...
Well, obviously, everyone
Yeah,
does
so
that.
Is that most weeks?
One
Or
of
is
my
that-
favourite... Well, not in the pandemic.
No.
Everything is provisoed, isn't it, with in the pandemic. My favourite hobbies is making stuff. Making stuff for fun and making stuff to wear. Because I go to Great Ormond Street Hospital, visit the wards, dressed as a stormtrooper. We do lots of events. The garrison that I'm a part of is called the UK Garrison. There's thousands of us globally do this.
So it's all organised then? Is it?
Yeah.
Garrison,
More than
yeah.
organised. It's like the church with risk assessments, child protection, and accounts. It's really wonderful being in a place where I can hang out with blokes that are not Christians, and I get to talk about my faith. I can genuinely say that I have prayed for Darth Vader. Just before one troop, I was talking to Darth Vader, and there was a few things he shared, and I said, "Look, can I pray for you?" And I did. I've been on the red carpet twice for 2 Star Wars films, and I got to pray for a couple of people on the red carpet. Can I just pray for you? That sounds dreadful. And I just quickly prayed. So I love that. So that's my hobby, is hanging out with people and going to Comic-Con, dressing up as a Ghostbuster or dressing up as a stormtrooper. Or
How did you get into that, I suppose, is the question.
So Becky and I went to Comic-Con because it's only down the road here. We're talking about 150,000 people turn up. And there was a stand there with these people dressed up as stormtroopers. And I got chatting to them, and they go to visit kids in hospital. They go to charity events. And I love chatting to them. And about a year later, I'm sat with Becky. We're having a coffee. It's our day off. And I said, Bex, I just feel like I'm only ever hanging out with Christians. I just feel trapped in my estate. Love it, but I feel trapped, and I just need something that gives me some life for me. And she said, well, why don't you do that thing and join the UK Garrison? And I looked at her, I was like, are you kidding me? And I went online and found what was my first Stormtrooper armour. And since then, I've built 4 different Stormtrooper armours. Darth Vader, Officer, Ghostbuster, and I love it because you really do get to spend time with people. And there's one chap who regularly comes back to me and says, I was talking to this bloke over here about Christianity, and he said this, do you believe what he believes?
It's like Jessop's all over again.
I love it.
Well, look, it's very nearly time to turn our attention to outdoor dining as we have a look inside your picnic hamper. And that means it must be time for a quick round of my favourite things.
My favourite things.
Yes, a very straightforward game, Chris. We give you 5 categories, and you just have to tell us your favourite thing in that category.
Okay, what could be simpler? And so our first category is your favourite way of insulting someone. No, it's not really, don't worry. Our first category is always your favourite book of the Bible. So, Chris, favourite book?
Oh, yeah. It's like picking your favourite child. You go, at the moment,
That's the next category.
Funny enough,
I don't think I can pick my favourite book of the Bible because they're all interconnected, and I just find it too difficult to do that. I think at the moment we're walking through the book of Exodus, and I'm loving that. And there's so much in there that's hidden in the text behind the text that I feel like I'm refinding things that I'd forgotten about. So I'm loving the book of Exodus again. But if you'd have asked me that at Christmas I said the Gospel of Mark. If you'd have asked me that back in September, I'd probably said Nehemiah. So it's too hard.
Okay, next question. Shirt. What's your favourite shirt? Well, a nice one today.
These
actually.
ones. Well, I've got 6 of these in different colours because I love them. Because
pockets.
They have pockets at the front. I have my pens in there, highlighter. My mask, a snot rag. I love it. And I bought one of these originally, so when I'm using my drill press and my bandsaw, which is here, I can put like my screwdriver in the pocket, and then you can do something.
Have you got a sonic screwdriver?
I do not have a sonic screwdriver. And I loved it, really loved it. And then I just ended up buying another one, and then another one, and another one. They're really solid.
Yeah.
And I've now got a collection of them in different colours, and it's all I wear. I'm not very into clothes. And I'm very happy having multiples of the same thing. Yeah. So I'll often have 3 or 4 pairs of jeans that are all identical. My drawers are filled full of just very simple black T-shirts. I don't have. If I've got a T-shirt with something on it, it's because somebody else bought me it. I don't have to think. I just put them on. And
that's your favourite shirt, isn't it?
What?
The one you've got. You wear
this one. Well, I've got my standard blue and white check shirt on.
Yeah,
I don't mind.
Yeah, I've got a really nice stripy shirt. It knocks spots off all my other shirts.
That's dreadful.
Anyway, very good. Right, okay. The third category, you'll like this one, is this season's always going to be the same as top 5. Your top 5 films.
See, I can't answer that.
You can't
answer
I'm afraid
that.
You have to.
So I'm going to give you an alternative to it. I'm going to give you not my top 5
700.
films, but my top 5 directors.
Ooh.
Because I can't separate out there's just too many films. I love movies. We watch multiple movies a week. So to try and say these are my top 5 films, I would really struggle.
Yeah.
But George Lucas, Star Wars, George Lucas.
Yeah, okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
The other director that I absolutely adore is Wes Anderson. I don't know if you've seen any Wes Anderson films.
I'm sure I have.
So Life Aquatic and Grand Hotel Budapest Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs, The French Dispatch. He's just got a really unique directing style. So I love him, absolutely adore him. Hitchcock. I've got every Hitchcock movie that he's ever made. Love working my way through those. Quentin Tarantino. I do like a bit of violence. I love Quentin Tarantino. I just think he's such a dynamic director, and the films he makes I think are so interesting. And then Steven Spielberg. Indiana Jones, E.T. You can't go wrong with a Steven Spielberg movie. I just think he's outstanding. So that'd be my 5 directors.
I think that's a fair response. Actually, it's quite interesting.
That's good.
There's obviously a massive amount of interest / geekdom going on in there, isn't it? Which is another common theme, isn't it?
So I love watching a film and doing a deep dive. So I'll often have my phone there, and while I'm watching the film, this actor walks in and you think, oh, what else have they been in? And then I'm always interested in the alternative take. So at the end of the film, I'll watch deleted scenes, or I love watching what the director says about how they made the film. So I'm really into getting the art book for a film as well, and seeing how they designed the costume, what was the scripting process. I love all of that around a film.
So taking it to a whole new level, frankly. Amazing. Yeah. So if you could only watch one film from henceforth, would you be able to choose that film?
Well, it would be Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
But that's because you forced me to choose.
You forced me to do it. Here we go.
It would be Empire. I think I enjoy Star Wars New Hope better, but you can't have Star Wars without Boba Fett.
That's very good. Sorry, I didn't wish to force your arm, but I was just Chris. That was interesting.
But you did anyway.
That's very nice.
Okay.
I can't remember what the DVD was. We were watching last week. I went to the deleted scenes, and there was nothing there.
That's pretty poor, isn't it?
That's poor. That's poor as well.
I'd take that back. They've shortchanged you.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Simon, go on.
Okay.
Give us a category, mate.
Okay, Chris. What's your favourite road?
Yeah, I've never contemplated that one, so I'd give much of an answer.
Favourite road? You must have done. Everyone thinks their favourite road.
I don't know if I've... How would you even start to work that one out?
Well, my father-in-law bless him, he died a couple of years ago. He always used to, when he was driving, it was a nice smooth bit of road. He'd always go, "Oh, this is a nice bit of road." And it became, "Oh, that's an NBR." And now me and my wife, whenever we're going somewhere and the roads, it's nice and smooth and there's no potholes, we go, "NBR."
I barely drive.
Okay.
I barely drive. It's
Yeah.
walking, cycling, or tubing because it's
Okay.
London, isn't it? There's a lovely bit up by Royal London Hospital.
There we
It's
go.
all-
Oh, there we
it's,
go.
it's all
Yeah.
cobbles, and often when you get on that, you think, "Oh, that's interesting."
Okay,
Well,
there we go.
that's
That's good.
a very
Cobble
niche
Street.
choice. I'm glad. Oh, yeah, I thought we were going to be stumped then, but it was nice.
What your favourite road, Ian? Have you got
My favourite road, I don't know. I think is possibly the road that goes through the middle of Glencoe in
lovely.
Scotland, somewhere between Glasgow and Loch Lomond. I think.
Do you drive up there just to?
Just to go on that road?
only on Saturdays normally, not this Saturday. Obviously.
Yeah.
And but there's just something.
Yeah.
The mist is often rolling around the
Yeah,
hills, and it's very beautiful. But it's also sort of quite menacing. It's where there was a big clan dispute.
Well, now you've said that.
It's
Croyd Bay. So we love
Oh,
going
yeah.
to Croyd Bay. And
Yeah.
as you approach Croyd Bay, you drive up at the hill, and then suddenly the sea opens. Croyd Bay opens up in front of you. I suppose that would be one of those moments where we all, as a family, go, "Oh, we've arrived."
Oh, yeah.
I suppose that would be a.
Yeah, good choice.
Yeah, well,
choice.
I'll show my age here, but I'm a massive AC/DC fan. So my favourite road, I think, is the M18. It's the highway to Hull.
I think we're setting a record for a number of really, truly awful. But you're doing better than
I think I'm
so
doing.
far.
I'm 2-1 ahead of you now.
Yeah, that's good. We'll give you that one. Right.
Give me that one.
Well, I think
Okay.
the last category. I think, Chris, we've established that you quite like Star Wars. So the last category is your favourite star. Now it's always multiple choice, so I'll give you 3 possible answers.
Is it multiple choice because nobody knows a name of a star?
No, it's multiple choice because I get to choose what your possible answers can be.
Then.
It's just the way it works. It's my show. And so
You
you're,
said quite forcefully.
yeah.
didn't
So
you?
just ask the question.
I'm now scared.
I
Anyway,
was quite scared there.
so Chris, your favourite star, and the options are Beatles drummer and the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine, Ringo Starr. The chocolate-covered chewy confection, the Star Bar. Or leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer.
I am a big Beatles fan.
Okay.
I inherited my dad's first pressings of his Beatles albums, and I absolutely love the new Let It Be documentary on Disney Plus, and it reminded me how much I loved the Beatles. And in that, Ringo spends most of his time sat in the background waiting for the bus stop to end, playing along and trying to just make some cheeky comments to make the whole thing a bit more light-hearted. I thought, I do like you, Ringo. But I would have to say, Ringo.
Yeah, I think it's a good out of that
Good call.
That
Yeah.
selection, I think Ringo's
yeah.
a very good answer, and some excellent answers there overall, Chris. Thank you very much. And your prize for that is to relax and dream of your perfect picnic, as we ask you.
What would you pick in your perfect picnic if the picking were up to you? Would you be sticking in some finger-licking chicken, or would you be silly and pick Piccalilli? Tell us, what would you choose?
Yum, yum.
Yes, what would you pick for your perfect picnic? But just before we tuck in, as ever, we'd like to know, Chris, where would you like your perfect picnic to be?
There is a place that is just a perfect place for going picnicking that we go regularly as a family. So Epping Forest is not far from here. Now, we live surrounded by high-rise flats. So going to greenery is really important to us as a family. So we get in the car, we drive up to Epping, and we just go for walks in Epping Forest, put on our walking boots, and we love going there. And regularly when we go there, we go with just 3 items, which we end up. So I have a little gas canister and kettle and make hot chocolate and coffee. We take marshmallows. And we have a little can that you can light of like lighter fluid, and you can toast marshmallows over it.
Yeah.
So we love doing that, and we take some hobnobs and we do marshmallows. The other thing is bacon butties. So we've made up a bacon butty, gone to Epping Forest, walk into the middle of the forest, and then sit down and have a little bit of a picnic.
Fantastic.
And the last time we went, this deer walked past us, and it just felt like a wonderful, magical moment. And this deer kind of went, "Oh, hang on, you're there. Oh, I'll go this way." Try it on. So Epping Forest is lovely to go
fantastic.
picnicking, and it's not big green fields; it's woods. Leaves on the floor, and you find a bit of tree that's fallen down to sit on. That's what we love.
sounds
Love doing that.
Does, and very specific, and it's nice to have a picnic which is drawn from actual experience. Actually,
Yes,
very nice. But back to our journey along the Rogers Highway, and we've looked at the past and the present. Let's look to the future.
Yes, Chris, what would you like us to be talking about if we were doing this show 12 years from now?
See, that I find that really hard, that kind of question. I'm too present. I'm not very good at the what next. I'm very good at the what now. And I know what the next 12 months or couple of years look like. But beyond 2 or 3 years, I find it really quite difficult. So if you just say, where are you going to be? What are you going to be doing? I can't get my head around that. I do know that in the last few years, I've turned down a job in Australia, which my wife thought I was kidding on. But I don't know. I find it really, really hard. Will we be in London? Not a clue. What will we be talking about? Well, I can't even tell you the state of the church. I can't tell you about the state of it. I just don't know. I find that really hard.
Yeah.
Do you find it easy doing that?
No, not really. I mean, it's quite challenging to think just generally in life. Yeah, I'm a bit older than you, obviously.
You'll be 90, won't you?
Not quite.
Right, sorry,
70 maybe. Yeah.
Sorry.
And so it's challenging because you think, well, actually, am I just going to bumble along doing what I'm doing, or is it going to be quite significantly different? What would I like to have achieved? Would I like to have built some sort of legacy in the next 12 years or whatever?
Yeah.
Depends how old one is. I think it makes a big difference. But
My wife would be like, no, we're going to do this. We're going to
There's a
move
plan.
here. This is the house we're going to move to. This is what we'll be talking about. She would be all over that.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we wish you every blessing, Chris, wherever life may take you.
We do indeed.
And that brings us to the rather intellectual final straight of the show.
Yes, and we start by continuing our campaign to correct some of the misunderstandings that we've seen bandied around about the Bible. And we call this part of the show...
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
Yes, is it true? And this week we turn our attention to the Last Supper that Jesus had with his disciples. Now, we've been studying the famous painting of that supper by Leonardo da Vinci, and it appears to us pretty evident that there are... Sorry, I've got the keyboard now. And it appears to us pretty evident that there are a number of onion bhajis on the table. And that therefore suggests that the Last Supper was actually a takeaway curry from the very popular Jerusalem tandoori restaurant. So, Reverend Cris Rogers.
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
Yes, is it true?
I would love to see an Indian tandoori in Jerusalem.
Yeah. I think it was very popular, I think.
I've never seen that in the Jewish quarter. I'm not sure it's in the Armenian quarter, the Christian quarter. Well, maybe on the outskirts of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
I was in Jerusalem 7 days before the pandemic. We were out there, and I did have a really tasty KFC in Jerusalem. Both me and my son agree it was the tastiest KFC I think we've ever had. But I just don't see it happening, particularly because it was Passover. I've never seen a bhaji as part of the Passover meal.
No. Maybe. Well, it looks. I mean, if you look at, listeners, you can look at the painting. It's
very much like
obviously bhajis placed around the table, but Passover lamb, so a nice Rogan Josh would have been very nice. They would be very nice.
Yes.
I think the main thing that struck me is that we talk about Jesus breaking bread, don't we? And so you don't break bread, you tear bread, don't you? But you do break poppadoms.
You do break bread. So mat sauce bread is like a cracker. You crack it because it's unleavened.
Yes. What I find interesting is that if you look at the King James Bible and the Geneva Bible, it says that Jesus took bread. If you look at all the current translations, they say he took a loaf of bread.
Well, that's
it wouldn't have been a loaf,
purely a Western translation.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been a loaf, would it?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been. Yeah, the NIV will play into your Western understandings.
But I think that's what confused me originally in terms of and would they be poppadoms, and combine that with the onion bhajis. I think it made perfect sense, don't you think? Well, I fear that's probably not true, that one.
I'm sad it's not true.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some strange liberal church that has tried communion with with a curry.
It would be nice. I mean, actually, a lot of churches, when we take communion now to commemorate that, obviously do have basically mini poppadoms, don't they?
Poppadoms don't usually stick to the roof of your mouth. You have to try and eat it behind it to get it off, though.
I don't know. I can't help feeling there might be a grain of truth in there somewhere. But anyway, with that, Chris, perhaps you would bless us with your spiritual pearl of wisdom.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
I love it. I wanted to share this with you. When I study my Bible, what I love to do is print the passage out. So, listener, I'm showing a piece of paper right now. So what I do is I print the passage out, and I love to make notes and colour in, and I love to kind of doodle around it. So I like to engage with the passage. So this week I was doing this for myself, and came across, I was studying 2 Peter chapter 1. I just want to read this little bit to you because it reminded me a little bit of a maths equation. If the answer to life's fruitfulness, if the equals is fruitfulness, what's the maths equation that would help us to be fruitful in life? And I was reading this 2 Peter chapter 1 from verse 3, and it just says his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life. So his divine power is Jesus, the death and resurrection of Jesus. So what is it then that I need, as well as that divine power of Jesus, to become fruitful in my life? If I want my life to thrive, because actually that's what we're all after, isn't it? We want a life that is fruitful. And actually at the end of the passage, it says here that the danger is if we don't do what I'm about to tell you. It says, and if you don't do it in increasing measure, then you'll be ineffective and unproductive. So I think, okay, so I was reading this going, I've got to take note of this passage, because if not, I'm going to be ineffective and unproductive. And actually none of us wants that in life. We want to be fruitful. So what is it? I was reading this going, what is it then that's going to make me fruitful? And it just says this: for this very reason, make every effort to add. Now, it was the word add there that made me think maths equation. For this very reason, take every effort to add to your faith. And it has then a list of things. So this is my pearl of wisdom. If you want to be fruitful in your life, there's Jesus, his death and his resurrection, plus your faith. And Jesus says it's faith the size of a mustard seed. So if you think I don't have much faith, then don't worry about it. Faith the size of a mustard seed will do. So Jesus plus faith. And then Peter says, add these things. So what are these things we're going to add? And he says this: for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith the virtues of knowledge, to knowledge, self-control, to self-control, perseverance, to perseverance, godliness, and to godliness, mutual affection, and to mutual affection, love. And if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive. So my pearl of wisdom is this: Jesus plus faith plus these things here are what will make our lives fruitful. And these things, it's the virtue of knowledge, growing in understanding, reading the scripture. If you want to be fruitful, we've got to know the word of God. If we want to be fruitful, then we've got to have self-control. That's about our hearts and what's going on internally. If we want to be fruitful, then it's learning perseverance and endurance. If we want to be fruitful, my translation said godliness here, but actually it's a life lived in reverence to God. And then mutual affection, that's loving each other, loving sidewards. And then it just ends by saying, and on top of mutual affection, add love. In other words, friends, if you want to have a life that is fruitful, it's Jesus plus faith lived out. We could call it discipleship, wouldn't we? Living out those things each day. So that would be my pearl of wisdom. If you want to have a fruitful life, don't just believe in Jesus. Don't just have faith in Jesus, but walk in it. Do the stuff, live it out each day, and then you'll experience that fruitful life.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Well, thank you very much for that, Chris. Excellent. And that brief moment of the sublime sadly leads us to the ridiculous. And that is...
Simon's random question.
Simon, what is your random question for Chris?
Well, Chris, you're clearly blessed with a fine head of hair and indeed a rather splendid beard.
Definitely.
But if instead of hair, your head sprouted fruit and vegetables, which fruit or veg would you most like to have growing on you?
Yeah, that's a very important question.
It wouldn't be veg.
Wouldn't be
It'd
veg.
be a fruit.
Oh, no,
it would be
really?
a fruit.
Okay.
I'm a fruit. I grew up with a fruit bowl.
Okay.
We always had a fruit bowl full of fruit, vegetables. I forced myself. It'd have to be. I love bananas.
Bananas?
Bananas feel like a child's fruit, don't they? They don't feel like a mature fruit. My bishop sent me a fruit basket last year, and it had dragon fruit in it, apple pears, which I'd never heard of an apple pear. No. It's neither an apple nor a pear.
Right.
Even though I had all of these, just banana. I'd love.
Yeah.
It's banana and custard. To be fair, is my little. If you want to make me a dessert, that was just a really good dessert. Banana and custard would be the absolute winner for me. My family know this, and for my birthday last week, my daughter bought me 10 packets of Bird's custard and a custard jug.
So how would you wear the banana? Would you wear them sort of? Would you have a centre parting sort of?
I'm thinking if you're going to have bananas growing on your head, then anyway is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
There's not
You
going
could have a
to
sort
be.
of side parting.
There's not
It's
gonna be a
follow
way
the curve
that's,
of the cranium, couldn't it?
I mean, if you did ever go
And then-
bald, you could have a good brush over. Couldn't
I'm just
you?
thinking more Bob. If you're going to do it, then a Bob Marley
Oh, okay.
kind of
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
thing would.
Or you
Yeah.
could. I mean, or you could slice them. It wouldn't be growing, but the same sort of thing.
Would you have them peel? You wouldn't
Stretch-
peel them, would you?
Well, if you peel them, slice them, then you could use custard as a product. couldn't you?
yeah,
To-
product
you know,
as
as you
custard,
would
couldn't
Hair
you?
product. Yeah.
hair gel. That would be quite nice.
Yeah. Would you have a matching banana beard as well?
Well,
or
do
would
you
have
realise
something
that
different?
bananas grow the opposite direction? Well, I'm saying, do you know? You may know this. You think, Chris, why did you not know this? Bananas don't grow the way that I thought they grew. So if an apple grows on a tree, it grows hanging down. A banana grows growing up. So bananas grow
yeah,
upwards.
they do, don't they?
So if you were to have that on your head,
You'd look taller, wouldn't you?
It would be, you'd look like Marge Simpson.
Nice.
I suppose if you had a beard, your beard would just grow up, wouldn't they? Get in your eyes, wouldn't they? 'Cause they
Beards
grow
do
up.
that anyway. They tend to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd look like the dog off Tom and Jerry, wouldn't you? Oh,
Yeah, that's my boy.
that's the one.
Spike, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. But it's
Fantastic. I like that. I like
I
that.
think it's a good shout because if you had
Yeah.
particularly soft fruit,
Yeah.
you know, like strawberries or something, if you had strawberries and you were playing football and you headed the ball, it would just look
go
like
with
there'd been a
disaster, wouldn't it?
bloodbath, wouldn't there?
Yeah.
Juice pouring down.
Cherries.
Or cherries.
Cherries,
It would
yeah.
just be horrific.
Yeah. I was thinking, I guess if you were a rugby player and you had cauliflower ears,
Oh, right,
you'd
yeah.
have matching hair, couldn't you?
Yeah, well, you could have complementary hair, like broccoli,
Oh, yeah.
possibly,
Yeah,
wouldn't you?
Yeah, broccoli would be good.
But it wouldn't look good on your face, would it? It would look like you had some terrible
I
skin
suppose it
disease.
would rot as well. Once you got it in your hairbrush and left it,
Yeah. This is a
Anyway,
very important thing for everyone
yeah, no, good. Excellent.
to think about, I think. But anyway, I was starting to think, Simon, that your random questions were getting a bit more helpful, but clearly that was a false dawn with that gibberish. But in any case, that was...
Simon's random question.
Well, Chris, you'll be pleased to know it's time for us to get out of your hair. Or should I say bananas? We've really enjoyed our conversations. Thank you very much for being on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And dear listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. Remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or a stamped addressed envelope. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you can. We look forward to your company as we continue to drag our pew around to meet yet more fabulous guests. But just for now, it's Toodle Pip from me.
And tatty bye from me.
Join us again next time as we take a pew.
Take a pew.